share screen. Okay, and from beginning. There we go. I'm Oliver Goodenough. I'm a professor at Vermont Law School and also an affiliated faculty here at CodeX. And I'm appreciative of the opportunity. Thank you, CodeX, for doing this. I'm going to be really annoying because I'm going to break my talk into two very distinct parts. And I'm going to take one hat off and put another one on about halfway through. The first hat I'm wearing is the hat of a company called Skopos Labs, Inc. And Skopos, John Ney, our chief executive, gave a presentation about this time last year, maybe a little later in the winter. And we're going to take advantage of this to give a little update on where we are and how that's going. Second hat is going to be Vermont legislative initiatives around fintech and blockchain. So we're good. different hat. All right. So Skopos Labs update. Skopos Labs, Inc., founded in the fall of 2016. John Ney, another law professor, J.B. Ruhl, and myself as the founders. It was originally PredictGov. Some of you may think of it in that way. We found it too confining a name, and there were other folks in the territory who were using similar stuff, so we generalized it back to Skopos. And our approach is to use vector-based analytics to build representations of targeted texts. So it's a vector-based system for building what are effectively kind of abstracted representations of text groups. Then use machine learning approaches to train our algorithms to make predictions about the characteristics, outcomes, and relevance of those texts. A little aside, when John Ney first demonstrated this to me, we sat down and scraped Shakespeare, and like you're scraping Lewis Carroll. And his technique, among other things, we then did a cluster analysis of different plays and works, and the poetics all went off in one cluster. That's fine. You would expect anything to be able to do that. What convinced me was there was a cluster that came together that turned out to be the plays that are recognized as being co-authored by Shakespeare and other people. Mm-hmm. And the representation of Shakespeare-ness, which these machine learning vector approaches could do, was sufficiently nuanced to be able to say this is only half Shakespeare-ness, and to cluster that group. That was
a visual.
I do on the machine. I don't have it here. I can show you later. Anyway, that was the convincing moment for me. So, and then we take these, and we also co-train them with a broad set of external metadata. So we co-train these things with facts in the world, and you'll see in a moment. I'll come to that. John Ney has a PLLS paper. I apologize for not having the reference here, but I can get it for you if you want. What we've been applying this to is predicting legislative outcome at the federal level. That's our entry-level product that we've got. And this is how accurate is our technology? This is a back testing from the last Congress. The current Congress we're only partway into, so we're not advertising just yet. But if you use the method to construct a set of predictions around the 114th Congress and then back tested those predictions against the actuality, you see that this was the prediction of passage of the first chamber. The dots are our prediction, and the straight line would be if we were 100% correct. And what we do is we predict a cohort of basically a cohort of chances. You know, if you're at 10%, we would expect 10% of those things to actually pass, and you work up. By the way, you could get a 90% accuracy by just predicting nothing passes, because that would be so actually it's the upper corner on the right that we're most proud of, because that's the hardest piece is often to predict, are the things that actually are going to pass. So that's the first chamber. The next, this is predicting the actual enactment, the full enactment, and this is even a little better. Again, not perfect, but this is not a bad plot. This gives you useful, real-world, useful information that you can put to work around legislative outcomes as you go forward. In the past year, we've developed a line of products aimed at federal legislation and regulation, and we've begun some distribution. Congressional enactment and their likelihood was the first one, but also we've added in the relevance to particular companies and industry spheres. We've turned loose the predictive capacity of this on the things that would interest particular companies, and we've got matching up through a variety of different sources of lobbying data, 10Ks, all the different bits and pieces we can put together to do that. We have an initial entry-level product now available through Wolters Kluwer. Wolters Kluwer has licensed this for, and it's part of one of their platforms. We're testing direct distribution with several global firms of a more enhanced product. We have other products in development both to extend the Wolters Kluwer service and to be offered by Skopos and through other service providers as well. So we're in broad discussions, and we've got a bunch of stuff bubbling as we go forward.
Who do you see so far as your customers?
The customers are quite variable. As you'll see, there is an initial market for government affairs professionals. There is an increasing market if we go through. I'll come around in things like finance, and I'll explore those with you in just a moment if I may. Just to keep going on our past year, our own finance, we were able to raise an angel round of financing based on the SAFE approach. Provides a runway through this summer. Because this summer is coming towards us, we're now beginning a second round, which includes industry and institutional investors that we're scooping up, and we'll hope to do that. We have some revenues that have come to us from development fees and recurring revenues at the moment, low six figures, but it's not paying our bills yet, but it's very handy and not so bad for a year and a little bit out. Other categories, we've assembled a team, employees, contractors, advisors, folks from computer science, folks, some of our advisors have started up other companies. We've moved our headquarters to New York City. We started in Nashville, which is where John Nay's degree came from, and now we're in New York, which is proving particularly important for the financial aspects. We've got a patent application in, we've got trademarks, the IP is coming along. Relationships and recognition, we were part of the Duke Legal startup crowd. There's a Thomson Reuters FinTech sandbox, the CodeX track. Next 2 weeks from now at Legal Week, we're going to be a part of that. Various NDA covered conversations, which I can't go into further other than to say there they are. They're out there, and we're having fun with those. Looking forward. Here's where I come back to your question. Product expansion within the law, we're adding jurisdictions, among other things. We're adding jurisdictions, looking into the state law here in the U.S., international jurisdictions. Market expansion within the law, building on the Wolters Kluwer relationship and product, that's working pretty well, and we're going to keep building on that. Working with other established legal information suppliers and directly distributing an approach with different and more extensive functionalities. So that's still within the law. And who wants this? Again, lawyers who have reasons to represent people. One of the two things, if you turn the tool sort of backwards, it also tells you who you should, if you're a lawyer, who you should approach about to make a client. It will alert you to who among your current clients might be interested in a particular piece of legislation, and who you might go out to and approach about that. So it's a client retention and development tool.
So Oliver, have you thought about obviously the media?
Yes.
And trying to understand what passed, when, why?
Yes, we have, and we've been picked up in the media. I should mention that the very, very entryest level is available for free in one of the government prediction sites, and the media has been picking up and using it. We've been used by some fairly interesting media.
So pro-Google kind of.
Yeah, exactly. And even at that entry level, for instance, we kept predicting that the healthcare repeal bill would not pass, and we looked at that and we went, and it kept saying no, that's not a high priority, and and my goodness, our algorithm was right to our surprise. We're thinking, we're gonna have to. It's a high profile one. We're gonna have to apologize for this. What the algorithm knew was this was tough enough that it was just going to be hard. It was just such hard lifting. Things like this were such hard lifting plus the metadata training that we'd done against who introduced it, what houses, all of the stuff that sits there. One of the metadata ones that turns out to be interesting is the hurricane rates, because different legislation passes if there's a high level of natural disasters than does otherwise. So actually, hurricane rates turns out to be modestly predictive for certain pieces of legislation. So that's among the, there are hundreds of different metadata pieces that we co-train it with. That's one of them. It turns out to be useful to do. Also moving forward, looking forward, adding additional markets. One of the things we're working on now is finance.
Yeah.
We can provide short-term and long-term predictions linking legal developments to particular companies and industry sectors. So we can say this bill is going to be of interest to these companies, and we can even give to some degree, based on some past similar bills, where some latent gain or loss for those companies may be. Again, that we don't have the same quite as lovely curve of predictability that we saw with the actual outcomes of the legislation. But if you can get a leg up, we're targeting hedge funds on trading and investment on that. We're targeting management for their internal strategic analysis. We're doing consultants who would then provide reports back to folks. M&A participants, merger and acquisition participants, we anticipate that a Skopos report as a part of due diligence. What is its exposure? What in the legislative world? What is the likelihood of new developments there? What is its exposure in the regulatory world? Because we're building regulatory prediction into some of this as well. So anyway, we're in discussions across these. We have a reason to be hopeful that something can happen in that area. So that's an outreach within the now for finance. And our current rounds and finances and revenues actually can support this kind of, if we can close this next angel round, we can support what we're talking about here from that. Looking forward in the longer term, these techniques work with high value text analysis across many domains. The law is a good place to start with this. We've started in the law. There are other areas of the law. We've consciously held back from things like e-discovery, although you could imagine turning this loose on e-discovery with some use. That marketplace is so crowded at the moment that we're not going there yet. But eventually something along this line could be useful there. So new developments with products within the law, outside the law, there are, again, I'm not going to go into them because I don't want to tip our hand necessarily, but there are many, many domains where textual understanding has high value and high return, and this will help with that. Need not be text. These vector and analytics can also apply to things as diverse as musical notes and structured numerical data. Any kind of structured thing that you can represent through this, you can get in this. The cost per vertical isn't astronomical. Some measure of 6 figures probably gets you into a vertical. But there's management, technologist time, marketing resources. We're husbanding ourselves. So at least for the moment, we're doing law. But pursuing the growth will require further capital, and we anticipate that, again, if we can keep on a good trajectory, that sometime in the next 12 to 18 months that we will look for a more serious injection of capital. Those of you who are VCs attending, we'd be happy to share with you as well. So open to discussing this product line, financing, etc. John Ney at Skopos Labs. John at Skopos Labs is one of the folks to talk to on this.
So I'm on the investment committee of a fund that we should talk.
We will have a conversation. Thank you. Anyway, this is going forward. I think in a way that we're encouraged. Again, obviously, you can stub your toe with a startup at any point, but at least for the moment, we're going along on a line that's working pretty well, and we're grateful to CodeX for its chance to share it initially and for some of the input. Yes.
If someone were to give you 40,000 settlement agreements for class action settlements, would you be able to reverse engineer perhaps what a fair and reasonable settlement might be considered as determined by the historical precedent? Perhaps in a short...
I wouldn't necessarily use the labels of fair, but I could use the labels of widely accepted. I mean, I'm not going to put a normative value on, but a behavioral value we could probably do some of. Cool. We had a conversation with some folks about some who had big settlement data. The limit of this is A, some money, but B, the training data.
Yeah.
as any of us who are doing this kind of thing now, if you can get the training data, you can do stuff. And part of the problem with the law is the training data is balkanized and hard to do. We looked at doing cases, and the problem with cases is unless you can back into the pleadings, you don't have the training data. Cases by themselves don't train on anything except themselves, and you can't do any prediction back unless you can get into the precursors. So finding precursors, that kind of data that you're talking about, depending on what you're trying to train it for and how deeply back you can get into the history, there you go. So yes, if you'd like to chat, we can talk further.
Do you want to take other questions?
Other questions? Yeah, a couple other questions. If there are questions on this one before I take my for-profit hat off and put my non-profit hat back on.
Okay, great. If anybody out there wants to unmute themselves or raise their hand or chat, we'll give you a few more seconds.
Okay.
All right.
All right. Now, so escape.
Wait, I insist that you tie a different bow tie. And teach us all how.
I'll do that later. Okay, well, offline, I'll be happy to talk about it. But those who haven't met me before, I do tend to favor bow ties, and there we are. Shame on me. Hang on. Cancel. I want to go there, and then I want to do this, and then I want to do that, and I want to go there. Okay. CodeX report number 2, different hat. Why is this a different hat? Because this is a hat which is done in my nonprofit educational context as the co-director of the Center for Legal Innovation at the Vermont Law School. Vermont is a wonderful state in many, many ways. And one of the things that it's wonderful is that it's a small state that tries to be nimble. And here the key starting point is this Paul Romer formulation, which is, Paul Romer is the chief economist at the World Bank now, a very, very well-known institutional and developmental economist. And he says economic growth is driven by the co-evolution of 2 sets of ideas, technologies and rules. Governments can increase the rate of growth in ways that benefit all citizens by creating systems of rules that are both encouraging of and responsive to innovation. The various goals do not always line up, so it's not an easy trick to do necessarily, because being open to innovation isn't always the same as being protective of your populace. It's a trade-off you've got to figure out. By the way, I should mention that this approach was developed further by the Grutter Institute that I work with, Grutter Institute for Law and Behavioral Research, in a project that had on ecosystems of innovation, and really trying to figure out using kind of mechanism design approaches to say what mechanisms in the law can be there that will help to foster a good economic growth rather than not. What will help foster good technological application growth, what will not. So Vermont, there's some recognition of this principle by the Vermont government, the legislature, the executive, even the courts. Actually, the Chief Justice of our Supreme Court gets a bunch of this and is open to all kinds of interesting things, as other justices have been. Past examples, there's the sort of big success for Vermont is the captive insurance business, where they have a regulatory structure that permits captive insurance to flourish and brings hundreds of millions of dollars to the Vermont in tax and economic activity and things like that. The hopeful things we were early on with digital corporations about 10 years ago. We have some blockchain recognition statute which is beginning to bring stuff to us, and we're hoping to go next. And the goal really is to find the equivalent of corporations in Delaware. The corporation law of Delaware pays for 1/3 of the Delaware state taxes simply from having provided historically early on a first mover, really good corporate legal structure. Okay, so that's the goal. The legislature commissioned a report, the last year's 2017 session commissioned a report and charged the center that I helped to run with developing a report in conjunction with 3 executive departments on basically this for blockchain and fintech more generally. We delivered the report in December of this last year, just last month. It's available online. The links are in the CodeX notice for this session. The report summarizes fintech, blockchain law and development and identifies target areas for this. I should note that the approach, the CLI is providing information and analysis and not advocacy. We're a nonprofit. We cannot advocate for the passage of particular legislation. We do not, but we provide an educated guide to where they might want to consider going if they want to go there. And let me just do the list. This is the list of the topics that were identified. I'll go through and I'm going to circle back and go in detail on 3 of them in particular. But just the list were a review of anti-fraud and other consumer protections. The states should just do that. Every state should do that. We should just go through and see, when online, there we go. RegTech initiatives. The government of Vermont should actually educate itself about the exploding world of RegTech and do stuff. Okay. So far, not terribly difficult. Enabling provisions for fintech and blockchain applications generally. Blockchain and cryptocurrency governance. We're going to come back to this because there's a specific proposal in legislation now for a cryptocurrency LLC, which we'll come back to in a little bit. Proof of authority and consensus in that e-residency. You may be aware of the Estonia e-residency. Anyway, they're suggesting Vermont should consider an e-residency program for cool Vermont. Anyway, but we'll see whether that goes.
And can you offer predictions as to whether or not any of this legislation will pass?
Conflict of interest. Good point. We have not applied. As you see, we haven't done state law yet. I'm encouraged, and I will. This is a piece of disclosure you'll see in a little bit. That when you get to legislation, the Senate sponsor for the legislation is my spouse. Which
conflict of interest.
no, not a conflict of interest in this context. No, because none of these proposals actually deal with anything Skopos does. One of the things we try to do is be very clear about,
No, but in predicting.
In predicting, that would even be. Vermont has passed these things in the past. I've been involved as part of a group around these things. Vermont takes this seriously. Some of this is going to pass. I can't tell you exactly which, but some of this is going to pass. The Vermont Bar Association, for instance, has picked up on this and is pushing a bunch of this. Their business association subcommittee is pushing this hard. Enabling provisions for other areas, identity trust companies. We'll come back to that again as one of the things we're going to come back to. Insurance products. We don't have anything specific there, but obviously insurance is going to be all over this. E-banking and fintech charters, again, is out there as a possibility. No specifics. Digital property transfers and registries. This is a classic suggestion for blockchain technology. We're probably going to enable that, and that one's easy because you just have to say, and those records may be kept on a blockchain, and then keep moving. Financial trustee safe harbor. This is basically safe harbors for investments that are made in financial technology that would allow that to go forward. Autonomous agent corporations and LLCs. We'll come back to that. That's one of the 3 that I want to come and spend a little time with. That's RoboCorps in effect. Adoption of blockchain, cryptocurrency, and fintech in Vermont. Government processes and functions. Private sector adoption. Again, a kind of a set of studies and summits and things like that to really try and see where this can be woven more fully into the Vermont government and education and private sector text. Note, Skopos is not involved in any of these fields. There we go. I make that point. We are not involved in this, other than maybe predicting it, but we don't do the states, so we're safe. Disclosure point: Vermont Senator Allison Clarkson is my spouse. A bill has been introduced in the Vermont Senate, S-269. Again, that's linked through the CodeX notice. House version is expected quickly. The first committee hearings on this will be taking place next week. So you say, is it likely to be adopted? Again, I'm not going to predict any particular one, but it is being taken seriously. And the bill actually proposes action on all of the targets. Current legislation for some, further study for others. All are subject to change, development, addition, and deletion through the legislative process. The sausage is getting made, and will get made as it does. 3 specifics: cryptocurrency LLC. The problem. What's the problem here? Blockchain libertarians say the structure can supplant law. The whole no, we don't need law because the structure will do it. And the answer to that is just wrong. It will supplant a ton of law, but not all of law. And here's some things. For instance, law will be applied to a currency blockchain, and without a structure, what's the law? At least in the U.S. is going to do. It's going to say it's probably a common law partnership. And a common law partnership is the worst possible outcome for a business organization you can have if you're a participant in that business organization. Why? Because there's joint and several liability. Everybody's liable. So when I promise you that the plaintiff's lawyers will line up for class action lawsuits when Bitcoin finally crashes, and they will sue every node and every miner as a partner in this. Now, will the law find that? I'm not going to predict it one way or the other, but if I was that lawyer, that's what I'm going to do. Because without a legal structure that actually prevents that, you're out there. By the way, Carla Reyes has done a lovely, she's an academic, has done a lovely paper. She suggests a different outcome, but her analysis of this piece is pretty sound, and she's done a nice job of it. Also, if you're a common law, it's not just a joint and several liability, there's cross-border taxation. If you're doing business with a partnership in the United States of America and you're a resident in China, you've just become a U.S. taxpayer. So every miner and every node may end up being a U.S. taxpayer no matter where they're located around the world if you come to that conclusion. Fiduciary duties. If you're both a miner and a player in the game and you're a partner in this thing, and then who do you owe the fiduciary duty questions are huge in this. So again, there's a whole set of things that are sitting out there waiting to explode, at least as far as I can see, around these cryptocurrencies and their legal status. And what all that really has to happen is one of them has to crash and burn in a really, really significant way, and the folks are going to have to go after. And even without that, there are other questions like governance. By what authority did the Ether network fork itself to recapture the stuff that had been stolen? It was a posse. They just rounded up enough people and they went out and did it. It would be really cool to have legal authority to have rounded up a posse and gone out and do that. So, solution: offer a legally recognized structure that can ameliorate many of these results. Hence, something like a limited liability company tailored to be a limited liability company wrapped around a cryptocurrency rather than not. So, first step, limited liability. Cool. Let's get the word limited liability right there in the company. Get that there. Secondly, governance. Now, two things. One is that it should recognize that the architecture can be rules. This shouldn't require that every blockchain reiterate itself as a natural language text when you've got the rules are basically the architecture. So one of the things you want to do is to say the architecture can be the rules. Cool. Allow formal authority for consensus algorithm choices, okay? Forks.
When you say rules here, do you mean like the LLC membership agreement?
Yeah, exactly. The operating agreement, much of what the operating agreement does will be said in that. By the way, the Vermont Digital LLC law already permits you to represent those rules in code. And so this would just be an extension of that.
This seems like it would be codifying into law the practices which people are already doing.
And put it into code. I mean, all of those safeguards that are in the code and the management of the thing is in the code. So that's cool. We just say, hey, read the code, apply the code. But you could put a language layer on top of that for some of these other things, like, who has the authority to fork it?
Yeah. So fascinating. Behavioral practice stack translates to potential behavioral modification stack, aka like a contract stack.
Yes.
Which translates to a consent stack.
Okay.
Which could be followed into terms and conditions of certain products and services. So anybody who uses Ether, for example, by extension, agrees to the following set of terms and conditions as agreed upon by the community.
There we go. All we're doing is saying you can do that, and we'll put a legal stamp on it. That's okay. That's okay. How are you going to change those architectures? When they come together and the committee of Ether comes together and says this is what we're going to do, they do it. It would be really lovely if they had actual legal authority to do it, as opposed to simply just do it.
So, Oliver, how are you going to train judges in Vermont to understand? Would you create a digital court?
I haven't gone that direction yet. Probably not necessary, because our judiciary is small, reasonably adept.
Like all two of them are.
No. We have 5 Supreme Court justices. No, I take your point. Eventually,
if the goal is to have a Delaware chancery for digital, you're going to bulk up. Good point.
Actually, I take it on board and do it. The thing is that the current judiciary, as I say, the Chief Justice of our Supreme Court is behind some of this. The digital the blockchain recognition evidence statute was heavily influenced by one of our Supreme Court justices, who basically said, "Oh, you don't know what you're doing," and then rewrote it, and then went forward. Anyway,
who's filing the LLC?
who's filing? Oh, cool! Isn't that a wonderful notion? Anybody. It's like an incorporator of a corporation. It doesn't have to be, I mean, that can be the last thing that person touches. The incorporator of a corporation can be the paralegal. Once you get the thing up and going, it has its own life.
But who are the members? Like, if you're in something that's anonymous, like who? I'm just like.
You could imagine a circumstance in which you said anybody who sets up as a node becomes a member. Anybody who I mean, tell me the architect. I'm not predetermined.
To a credit union, where by depositing in the credit union, you become a member of the credit union.
So by setting up the first node, you are the first member of setting up the LLC.
Yeah, it could be that. I mean, again, the point of it isn't to say that your question is a bad one. It's just to say, you tell me the answer you want, write it in, do it. That's what it will be.
But it could be anonymous. Like
Ooh, that's going to be hard.
If I have some coins and I don't tell anyone, how do you know? And
could be true. I mean, again, good question. I'm not going to give you an answer on that one because I'm going to let you design it for that one. You're a good lawyer. You can design that. All right. I mean, you can have proxy things in corps, or I mean, a car corporation where you have proxy, held in street name and proxy and through trusts, and I mean, there are ways of preserving that already, of doing similar things in corporations already.
Except that when somebody subpoenas, and when there's an estate and it has to be distributed, and we have to find who, we have ways to get.
We have ways to get there. Yes, we have ways to find this out. Anyway, location of activities, fiduciary duties, multiple role players. The statute addresses and says that it's not to be both a trader and a minor and a member. All those are different things. Those aren't fiduciary problems. That you can act for yourself in this. The location of activities is important because basically we're saying that being a member of the structure is different from your own activities. So we won't chase your own profits back into China. The Vermont tax, and we've gotten some criticism over this, but the Vermont tax actually meant to be a light touch. Instead of having an income tax in Vermont, the proposal is to pay it per transaction in the cryptocurrency. So in the same way that you reward the nodes and miners, you will reward the state of Vermont basically for they'll get a little ka-ching each time that happens.
So they would Vermont have in their infrastructure bank holdings of these digital currencies?
Yes, unless and until they liquidate them. Unless until they liquidate them, yes.
They would have a node.
They're going to have some amazing
That's
highways, really good highways.
Gas fee problems. The Government Accounting Standards Board.
Okay, wait, go nuts with this one. All right. There we go. That may be something we work out as we go forward. But to me, it's important to have the ability to pay the tax in the cryptocurrency, because then it becomes a part of the way the thing is normally structured. Instead of people digging into their pockets for more dollars, they can dig in. The Bitcoin manufacturer, Bitcoin system manufactures in a few cents and passes it through. U.S. tax, I can't do anything about yet, but international player concerns the separation of network activities from individual activities helps you there. And if it elects C Corp.status, then you have you do not pull all the people into the taxation in the United States. So the network layer becomes has an LLC with C Corp.status, which prevents the international grabbing of taxation of all the players by the U.S.
Hello, I've got a question on the line.
What?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
There's a question on the line. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I've been pushing the wrong buttons for a while. So I apologize if this was covered earlier. I had to step out for a minute. But a more prosaic question on the law of Vermont, since you happen to be from there.
Yeah.
My company's been trying to take the actual law itself for some regulatory compliance work we're doing and put it into a database. And we can't. Apparently, it's licensed only from LexisNexis.
I'll tell you. Talk to me later, and we'll figure out how to scrape it. It's all the statutes are online in a public database. Vermont is online in a public database from the legislature.
Do you want me to put your?
I'll send you an email. It'd be great.
That would be great. That'd be great. I'd be happy to help you. Shouldn't be a problem.
To what degree are there any planning processes in the state of Vermont's legislature with, say, state of Massachusetts in terms of cryptocurrency development, or Ottawa, or whatever the capital of Canada is, or even the government of the United States, in order to synchronize the cryptocurrency developments legislatively? Or do you see this as
there's the whole regulatory layer. There's many other layers. There's the currency policy layer. I used to be and I would disclaim that none of this is related to when I used to be a consultant with the Office of Financial Research at the Treasury, and they're trying to figure out, the U.S. currency regulatory structures that will lay on top of all of this. Again, not that the law specifically says we don't enable or restrict any other law's application by doing this. What we're just doing is providing that kind of organizational structure the way a corporation did for a traditional business enterprise. We're trying to have a tailored organizational structure for cryptocurrency. And there's proposals out there already, gathering some proposals to broaden the act to open its application to other forms of distributed ledger. Why just have it for crypto, when there are other forms of distributed ledger that could be benefiting from this. And I think that if it goes forward, it will do that. Second, identity trust.
3-minute
Okay, I have a 3-minute warning. Identity trusts and RoboCorps. Another idea that's on the table is a structure that would allow the formation of personal identity trust companies, which would be like a business, like a money trust. Only the thing that it holds for you under a fiduciary duty is personal data. Mm-hmm. And so that effectively there are proposals out there, OIX style applications, online identity exchange. These folks have a whole bunch of things of how to do this, but they're creating trust through contracting. And the proposal here is to say the entity itself will have an obligation under its charter to hold things for the benefit of its customers and not for its own benefit. And our feeling is that step could go a long way towards do this. We're talking about broadening it more generally. The Internet of Things. One of the problems with the Internet of Things, everybody's afraid that all the data is going to get sold, and you're going to be up the creek with that. If that Internet of Things worked through a company whose legal charter said it had to be administered for your benefit, that would up the probability of a good outcome significantly.
What would be the cyber surveillance of the Attorney General?
Good point. The proposed law says.
By the way, Oliver, that's not for later.
No.
That's for now.
Okay.
Because if we don't solve the oversight of the cyber, why would we be a state and authorizing a trust to hold these assets?
And indeed, the current proposal is that the Department of Financial Regulation which oversees traditional trust companies, will submit the rules on that. There we go. I don't have the answer for you yet. It's the perfect question. There we go. To get to the good answer to this, we got to do that. Last one: autonomous agent corporations, RoboCorps. And these are corporations. The current proposal is for a corporation that would have as its power to have its sole business be the operation of an autonomous agent, basically giving a corporate structure to the operations of a bot. And it's a way of giving legal status to the bot.
For purposes of suing the bot too.
Yes, the whole thing. You can sue the bot. The bot now has legal status. We do not detach it from humans completely. There are 3 or 4 functions that there has to be a responsible human in the loop, and the responsible human, among other things, has to have the power to pull the plug. That's one of the key powers that we feel that responsible humans should have in this.
Dr. Strangelove? Where's Dr. Strangelove?
When you need him. All right. Anyway, the suggestion has been to broaden this into LLCs, and particularly into series LLCs, because then the Internet of Things, you could have each refrigerator could be a part of a series LLC. And have its own ability to have a legally cognizable identity for the operation of that bot.
So one refrigerator can buy power from the second.
Exactly. You can trade the whole thing, and the legal structure will be there. Now you can say. Just to return last piece on this. By the way, the process going forward, if people are interested in this, I can be a conduit, but the real point at this point is the legislature and the Vermont Bar Association. If people want to have further input and suggestions or questions, I'm happy to be a conduit. And as it goes forward.
Well, with that, we'll put your email address out there to the.
That would be terrific.
Okay.
So anyway, that's the right. You're absolutely right there. This is some of these things are a little bit of a sketch rather than a fully drawn thing. But if you don't start putting it out there, then you don't get the fully drawn thing. And we've left some of the drawing and some of these to the regulatory structure that would have the power to develop them. So this is a set of things Vermont's trying to do. Go back to Romer about using the law to promote technology. This is a set of approaches that Vermont is doing to try and do that. Thank you very much.
Very interesting.
Thank you.
Yeah. Alrighty, well, for those who can stick around for a minute or two, we'll have some brief announcements. We do plan on meeting next week, so in the same room at the same time. Anybody have any announcements quickly?
What's the update on Roland?
Oh, the update on Roland. Roland had his, as some of you may know, Roland tore his Achilles playing basketball not too long ago. And so he had surgery yesterday, and he was on email this morning. What a trooper. He was going to dial in. I have not seen him. So if he's out there somewhere, he is
He's
doing
lurking.
so quietly. Otherwise, he sends everybody his regrets and hopes to join us soon. Meanwhile, registration, because of his tireless efforts, future law registration is open. So go to www.codexfuturelaw.com for more information on the conference, which will be April 5th. We're also, the Law Science and Technology program at Stanford Law School, which is the umbrella program for CodeX, is participating in the Digital Cities Summit next month with Mr. Cahan is also moderating a panel, which will be very interesting. So if you want more on blockchain, LST is also, I'm convening a panel that will deal with some of these data privacy and security issues. There's a host of, Michelle Lee from Stanford Law School is going to be on a panel for AV. So if you're interested, I am going to put the URL out. It's over with the Global Project Center in the School of Engineering. So I'll put the URL in the chat box. But if you want more information, go to gpc.stanford.edu for information on the summit. Including an agenda. So I think that is all until next time. Great, thanks everybody. Happy New Year.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.